Friday night. A quiet house. The kind of night I usually enjoyed, just me, the couch, and some mindless TV while I waited for Jessica to come home. She was at her company's big corporate party, something she'd been hyped about for weeks. A fancy event at a luxury hotel downtown, filled with executives, free-flowing drinks, and all the coworkers she spent more time with than she did with me. She had told me I wouldn't enjoy it, and maybe she was right. I wasn't one for these kinds of things, small talk with people I didn't care about, pretending to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, standing around while she mingled. Still, something about tonight fell off. I had watched her get ready, standing in front of the mirror, carefully adjusting her dress, adding just a little more perfume than usual. It was the kind she saved for special occasions, the one she hadn't worn in months. The whole time, she had this energy about her, excited but nervous, rushed but careful. I had asked if she needed a ride, but she waved me off, saying she'd take an Uber. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the pause before she walked out the door. It was brief, barely noticeable, but I caught it, like she was waiting for me to say something, to ask something. I didn't, so she smiled, told me not to wait up, and left. For a while, I ignored my instincts. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had no reason to suspect anything. I wasn't some insecure husband who needed to track his wife's every move. She was just at a work event, having fun with colleagues. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was past midnight when my phone rang. The number was unknown. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was some spam call, but something told me to pick up. The second I heard the voice, I knew I had made a mistake trusting her. "You don't know me, but you should know what your wife is doing right now." The man on the other end sounded drunk. Slurred speech, the kind of slow, deliberate way people talk when they've had too much but still want to be understood. My grip tightened around the phone. Who is this? Doesn't matter. What matters is where your wife is. She's not in the ballroom anymore. He let out a slow, nasty chuckle. She's in one of the back rooms with Ryan. You know, Ryan from marketing? Thought you should hear it from someone before she comes home with lies. Ryan. I knew the name. She had mentioned him before, casually, in passing. Some guy on her team. A hard worker, a nice guy. I had never thought much of it. Never had a reason to. Until now, I didn't say a word. Didn't ask questions. I just listened. "You still there, man?" The caller slurred. Click. I hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, staring at the screen like it could give me answers. My mind was blank for a second, then everything started crashing down at once. I should have been in denial. I should have brushed it off as some drunk idiot trying to mess with me. But I wasn't an idiot. That uneasy feeling I had earlier wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. I knew. I had known from the moment she walked out that door. And now I had confirmation. The anger hit me fast. Not just anger, rage. A kind I hadn't felt in years. My jaw clenched, my breathing slowed. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. Cold. Focused. I wasn't going to sit here like a fool and wait for her to come home with whatever pathetic excuse she was planning. I grabbed my keys and headed for the party. I drove like a man with a purpose. Not reckless, not out of control, but with the kind of focused rage that made every movement precise. The streets blurred past me, neon signs reflecting off the windshield, but all I could see was the image forming in my head. Jessica, my wife, in some dimly lit back room with Ryan from marketing. The name alone made my stomach twist. Ryan. I had barely paid attention to him before. I'd seen his name in emails, maybe heard his voice in the background of a call when Jessica worked from home. He was just another forgettable coworker. Until now. Now, his name was seared into my brain, taking on a whole new meaning. The hotel came into view, a sleek, towering building downtown, the kind that charged 5 times the normal price just for the view. The parking lot was packed, the driveway filled with expensive cars, valet drivers rushing around. I pulled up to the curb and parked illegally. I didn't care. If I got a ticket, so be it. I had bigger things to deal with. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere hit me. Low music, warm lighting, the murmur of conversations, and the scent of expensive alcohol lingering in the air. The main ballroom was straight ahead, past the concierge desk, and a long hallway lined with glass walls. Inside, I could see groups of people laughing, drinks in hand, some swaying slightly as the effects of the night settled in. I scanned the crowd, looking for her. She wasn't there. I walked further in, taking the scene. The party was still going strong, though it had passed the formal networking stage and had moved into the let's pretend we're still professional while getting wasted phase. A few people glanced at me as I passed, probably wondering if I was supposed to be here. No one stopped me. I caught sight of a woman I recognized. One of Jessica's colleagues, a blonde woman who had been in our house once for a work thing. I didn't remember her name, but I didn't need to. She was tipsy, leaning against a high-top table, talking to someone else when I approached. Her eyes flicked to me, confusion crossing her face. "You seen Jessica?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. She blinked, then hesitated. "Oh, she was here earlier," she said, voice slow, like she was trying to remember. "Left with Ryan, I think. Probably went to—" She caught herself, suddenly realizing who she was talking to. My expression must have said enough because she clamped her mouth shut, eyes darting away. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked away before she could scramble for an excuse. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I could feel the tension in my muscles, that slow-building heat rising up my spine. I took in my surroundings. The hotel was big but not complicated. The elevators were to the right, leading up to the guest rooms. The signs above the hallways pointed to the conference rooms, lounges, and private event spaces. It wasn't hard to guess where they went. I moved toward the hallway. Each step felt heavier, but my mind was sharp. I wasn't stumbling into this blindly. I wasn't going to make a scene unless I had to. No, I wanted proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Because when I confronted her, I didn't want her to have a single excuse to hide behind. The hallway was quieter, dimly lit, with doors spaced evenly apart. Most were closed, but a few were cracked open, revealing small meeting rooms, empty except for stray glasses left behind by drunk executives. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh, a voice I recognized. Jessica's. My whole body tensed. The sound was coming from behind a closed door near the end of the hallway. It wasn't loud, but it was there. A giggle, light, playful, too familiar. And then another voice, deeper, relaxed. I didn't need to hear the words to know who it was. Ryan. I reached for the handle. Locked. Of course. For a brief moment, I stood there, jaw clenched so tightly I could feel the pressure in my temples. I could kick the door down. I could pound on it until they had no choice but to face me. But no, that was too easy. I stepped back, scanning the hallway. A few feet away, there was a small alcove, a janitor's closet, partially open. I slipped inside, leaving the door cracked just enough to see the hallway. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. After a few minutes, I heard movement inside the room. A muffled shuffle, the rustle of fabric. Then the sound of the door unlocking. It opened, and there they were. Jessica stepped out first, her dress slightly wrinkled, her hair not as perfectly styled as when she left the house. She was laughing, a hand pressed lightly to Ryan's chest. He followed right behind her, close, too close, his arm brushing against hers. I saw everything, and now they were going to see me. I stepped out of the shadows before they even had a chance to react. Jessica's laugh was still hanging in the air when her eyes landed on me. And in that split second, I saw it. Pure, unfiltered shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her brain was still catching up, still trying to process why I was standing there, in this hallway, at this exact moment. Ryan, on the other hand, was slower. He was still grinning, still riding whatever high he had been feeling, until he followed her gaze and saw me. Then the color drained from his face. For a moment, none of us moved. The only sound was the muffled music from the ballroom down the hall, distant laughter from people who had no idea that, just around the corner, someone's life was about to be torn apart. I took a step forward, slow, deliberate. Jessica flinched. She knew. She didn't need to ask why I was here. She didn't need me to explain. It was written all over my face. "Ew, what are you doing here?" She finally stammered, voice too high, too forced. Ryan took half a step back, like he was debating whether to run. I didn't answer her. Instead, I let my eyes drift down, taking in the details. The way her dress was slightly disheveled, The way Ryan's tie was loosened, his shirt untucked just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. And then I looked her in the eye. No words, just silence. Jessica swallowed hard, her hands fidgeting at her sides. She was scrambling, trying to piece together an explanation, a defense, anything that might get her out of this. This isn't, she started, then stopped. She knew she couldn't say it wasn't what it looked like. Not when I had just watched them leave a locked room together. Not when she looked the way she did. But she was desperate. Ryan was just helping me with something. She tried again, her voice unsteady. I let out a slow breath, jaw tight. Helping. That was her excuse. Ryan still hadn't said a word. He just stood there, looking like a man who had realized, far too late, that he had made a terrible mistake. I turned my attention to him. You, I said, my voice low, steady. He stiffened. Jessica's hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Let's go home, she said quickly. Please, let's talk about this in private. Like hell. I shook her off, my eyes never leaving Ryan. He knew he had to say something, but he had no idea what. Look, man, don't. I cut him off, taking another step closer. He took another step back. Don't say a single word. He shut up immediately. Jessica was still floundering. It was nothing, okay, she blurted out. It wasn't, nothing happened. Nothing happened. I almost laughed. Nothing, I repeated slowly, my voice edged with something dangerous. She nodded too quickly. Yes, we were just talking. Just, I snapped. Then why the hell did someone feel the need to call me and tell me my wife was screwing her co-worker in a back room? The words came out sharp, slicing through whatever flimsy excuse she had been trying to weave together. She blanched. Ryan's mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to defend himself, but he seemed to think better of it. Jessica's face twisted into something desperate. Who called you? She demanded. Someone is trying to start drama. Someone is trying to ruin us. I cut her off with a short, humorless laugh. Oh, so now it's a conspiracy? I don't know why someone would say that, she insisted, voice rising, like if she said it loud enough, it would become the truth. I swear I wasn't. I turned to Ryan. You hear that? I asked, tilting my head. She wasn't. He had the nerve to stay quiet. Jessica grabbed my arm again. Let's go home and talk, she pleaded. Please, let's just. I jerked away from her. Home, I repeated, my voice cold. You think we still have a home? Her face crumpled. Please, she whispered. I stared at her. The worst part wasn't that she had done this. It wasn't even that I had caught her. It was that she was standing here, looking me in the eye, and still trying to lie her way out of it. I had come here furious. But now I felt something else creeping in, something colder. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to throw punches, though God knows Ryan deserved it. No, I was going to do something worse. I was going to make sure this night was one she never forgot. I leaned in close, just enough so only she could hear me. You're going to walk back into that ballroom, I said quietly. You're going to smile, act like nothing's wrong, and then you're going to go home alone. Her breath hitched. I pulled back and looked at Ryan one last time. Then I turned and walked away. And I didn't look back. I didn't rush. I didn't storm off like some scorned fool. And I didn't make a scene like I was the one who had something to prove. No, I walked away with purpose, every step measured, my head high, because if there was one thing I wasn't going to do tonight, it was let Jessica and Ryan see me crumble. I could feel their eyes on my back. Jessica wanted to chase after me. I knew it. I could practically hear the war in her head, the panic, the desperate need to pull me back before I did something she couldn't control. But she didn't move. She knew better. I made it back to the main ballroom, stepping into the sea of people who had no idea what had just happened a few hallways away. Laughter echoed around me. Glasses clinked together in careless celebration. Music pulsed beneath it all. It was a whole different world here, a world where nothing was wrong, where people weren't betraying their spouses behind locked doors. And Jessica? She had to step right back into it. I didn't have to turn around and know she was still frozen in that hallway, caught between following me and pretending nothing had happened. She would choose the latter. I knew her well enough to know that, because Jessica was a survivor. She would fix her dress, smooth her hair, and make her way back into this ballroom like everything was fine, because in her mind, she could still fix this. She still had cards to play, lies to spin, ways to manipulate this into something salvageable. She just didn't realize yet. She had already lost. I grabbed a drink from the bar without thinking. Whiskey. Neat. The burn hit my throat as I knocked it back, but I barely felt it. The rage was still there, simmering beneath my skin. But the more I let it settle, the more something else took its place. Clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. Jessica hadn't tripped and fallen into a locked room with Ryan from marketing. No, this was deliberate, planned. And the way she had looked at me in that hallway, scrambling for excuses, she had been willing to lie straight to my face to the bitter end. That was the part one couldn't get past. Not the physical betrayal, not even the thought of her with another man, but the way she had looked me in the eye and still thought she could fool me. I should have gone home. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I wasn't done yet. I moved toward a group of people near the center of the ballroom, scanning the faces. I was looking for one in particular. It didn't take long to find her. Amanda, Jessica's best friend at work. The moment she saw me, her eyebrows shot up in surprise. Hey, I didn't think you were coming. I gave her a tight smile. I wasn't. Plans changed. She frowned, tilting her head slightly. Everything okay? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough. Did you see where Jessica went? Amanda hesitated, just for a second. Then she forced a casual smile. Oh, I think she stepped out for a minute. Probably needed some air. Air, right? I watched her carefully. Amanda wasn't stupid. She had seen something, or she at least knew enough to be suspicious. I took another sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch just a little too long. And then I saw it, the flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She knew. She wasn't going to say it outright, wasn't going to throw Jessica under the bus, but she wasn't entirely comfortable lying to my face either. That told me everything I needed to know. Jessica had been sloppy. I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head like I was brushing it off. Corporate parties, huh? I said, voice light, always full of surprises. Amanda forced another smile, but it was tighter this time. Yeah, she definitely knew. I let the conversation die there and turned back toward the bar, my mind working. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me tonight. She had done it right under the noses of people who knew us. People who had seen us together, who had been to our home, who had sat across from us at work dinners. Did she really think no one would talk? That no whispers would spread? That this would just vanish into thin air if she played innocent enough? No, she had been arrogant, careless, and that meant I wasn't just walking away from my marriage. I was going to ruin her, not in some dramatic, vengeful way, not with violence or reckless anger. No, I was going to let the truth do the work for me. I wasn't going to be the fool who got cheated on. She was going to be the woman who threw away everything for some guy in a suit who probably didn't even love her. I turned back toward the ballroom entrance, and just as I expected, there she was. Jessica. She had finally gathered herself enough to step back into the party, but she wasn't as put together as she thought she was. Her shoulders were stiff, her smile forced, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for me. Too late. I had already seen everything I needed to see. I drained the rest of my whiskey and walked right past her without saying a word. Because as far as I was concerned, Jessica no longer existed. I didn't go home. Not yet. Home was a place where Jessica's presence still lingered. Her clothes in the closet, her perfume on the sheets, her name on the bills stacked on the kitchen counter. I wasn't ready to walk into that. Not while the rage was still fresh. Not while the image of her stepping out of that locked room with Ryan was still burning in my brain. So I drove. No destination, no plan. Just the open road, the city lights flashing past me as I tried to let the night sink in. Jessica had cheated. Jessica had lied. Jessica had looked me in the eye and tried to play me for a fool. And now, she was going to wake up tomorrow in a world where I wasn't her husband anymore. The thought should have made me feel something. Pain, sorrow, regret. But all I felt was a strange kind of clarity. I wasn't the kind of man who begged. I wasn't the kind of man who stayed. Jessica had made her choice. I pulled into an all-night diner, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and syrup, where no one asked questions and the waitresses called you Han, even when you looked like hell. I slid into a booth by the window and ordered black coffee, letting the warmth ground me as I watched the occasional car roll by on the empty street. It wasn't until my second cup that I saw my phone light up. Jessica. I let it ring. Then a second call. Then a third. Then a text. Then another. And another. I picked up the phone, scrolling through the messages, already knowing exactly what they'd say. Where are you? Please just come home. I swear it wasn't what you think. Can we just talk? I made a mistake, okay? Please, baby, don't do this. I should have felt something, but all I felt was exhaustion. I set the phone down, ignoring the messages, and flagged the waitress for another refill. Jessica could sit in that house all night, waiting for me. She could sit there and wonder if I was coming back. Let her feel what it was like to be on the other side, to be uncertain, to be afraid, to have no control over what happened next. I checked the time. Nearly 3 a.m. I had no intention of going back tonight. Instead, I pulled up my banking app, scrolled to our joint accounts, and started making changes. First, I moved everything I could into my personal savings. Then I transferred out every cent from the emergency fund. Jessica had walked into that hotel tonight thinking she had power. By the time the sun came up, she'd realize how little she had left. The divorce papers would come next. And after that, she would be nothing but a memory. By the time the sun started creeping up over the horizon, I had already made up my mind. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, no last-ditch attempt at salvaging something that was already dead. Jessica had made her choice. Now, I was making mine. I left the diner just after sunrise, my coffee barely touched, the plate of eggs I ordered sitting cold and untouched in front of me. I had spent the past few hours planning my next steps, running through every possible scenario, every excuse she might try, every desperate plea she might make. And I realized something. She wasn't sorry. Not for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. That's why she had called me a dozen times. That's why she had sent those frantic messages. That's why she was probably pacing our house right now, waiting for me to walk through the door so she could throw herself into damage control. Because for Jessica, everything was fixable. She thought if she spun the right story, played the right emotions, she could convince me to stay. That's where she was wrong. I pulled into the driveway, shutting the engine off and sitting there for a moment. The house was dark, the curtains still drawn. She hadn't gone to sleep. I knew that without even checking. She had been waiting up all night, dreading this moment, probably rehearsing whatever lie she had settled on. I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. My key slid into the lock, the sound louder than usual in the early morning silence. Inside, the house smelled the same, looked the same, like nothing had changed. But everything had. The second I stepped in, I heard movement from the living room. Then, Jessica appeared. She looked terrible. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and she was still wearing the dress from last night, now wrinkled and creased. She had probably sat on the couch, staring at the front door, waiting for me to come home. "Where were you?" she asked, voice raw, exhausted. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked right past her, straight to the bedroom. She followed. "We need to talk." I opened the closet, grabbed a suitcase, and threw it onto the bed. Her face paled. She reached for me, but I stepped back, hands clenched at my sides. I didn't want her touching me. Not now. Not ever again. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "Just talk to me." I unzipped the suitcase and started packing. Clothes, shoes, essentials. I didn't need much. I wasn't planning on staying here any longer than I had to. Jessica stood there, watching, frozen in place. "Where are you going?" she finally asked. "Does it matter?" I said flatly, tossing a few more shirts into the bag. "Yes," she snapped, desperation creeping into her tone. "It matters. You're my husband." I let out a short laugh. "Am I?" She flinched like I had slapped her. "That's not fair," she said, voice shaking. It wasn't like that. You don't understand." I stopped packing and turned to her. "I don't understand," I repeated, voice dangerously low. She swallowed hard. "No, you don't. I was drunk. I made a mistake. It was stupid. It was meaningless. I wasn't thinking." I stared at her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not the woman I had married. Not the woman I had built a life with. Just another liar. Another coward. "You weren't thinking," I said slowly. Is that really the best excuse you could come up with? Her eyes glistened, and she shook her head. You weren't drunk when you left the house. I cut her off. You weren't drunk when you spent extra time getting ready. You weren't drunk when you stepped into that room and locked the door behind you. Tears spilled over her cheeks. It wasn't. Don't, I warned. She swallowed her words. I turned back to the suitcase, zipping it up. Please don't do this, she whispered. I grabbed my keys. You did this. She let out a choked sob. You're really leaving? I exhaled slowly. Jessica, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I left the second you stepped into that room with him. She broke then, collapsed onto the bed, shoulders shaking, hands covering her face. But I didn't feel anything. Not pity, not sorrow, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. I walked to the door, and just as I reached it, she lifted her head, eyes swollen, lips trembling. Do you still love me? She asked. I didn't even hesitate. No. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when she sobbed into her hands. Not when she gasped my name like it might somehow stop me. Not when I closed the bedroom door behind me and walked out into the hallway, suitcase in hand. I had spent years thinking of this house as my home, but now it was just a building filled with bad memories waiting to happen. The walls, the furniture, the pictures on the shelves, they all meant nothing now. They were just remnants of a life that had ended the moment I saw Jessica step out of that locked room with Ryan. And the worst part? She still thought this was something she could fix. She still thought if she cried hard enough, if she said the right words, if she begged just the right way, I would forget what she had done. That was the part that disgusted me the most. I reached the front door, gripping the handle, when I heard her footsteps behind me. Slower this time. Hesitant. Wait. I could hear the effort it took for her voice to come out steady. She was trying to pull herself together, trying to sound rational. I exhaled, jaw tightening. You don't have to go, she said softly, like she was afraid speaking too loudly would shatter whatever was left between us. We can, her voice wavered. We can figure this out. I can fix this. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You still don't get it, I said, turning just enough to look at her. She flinched at the coldness in my voice. You can't fix this, I told her, because you don't even understand what you broke. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't care. She had already proven what kind of person she was. Please, she whispered. I let out a slow breath and shook my head. You want me to stay? After what you did? She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting together. I wasn't thinking, she said again, like if she just repeated it enough times, it would mean something. I stared at her, silent for a long moment. Then I spoke, my voice flat. You know what's funny, Jessica? She didn't answer. I actually believe that, I said. I believe you weren't thinking. Not about me. Not about our marriage. Not about what would happen if I found out. You weren't thinking about anything except what you wanted in that moment. Her bottom lip trembled, but she stayed quiet. And now, I continued. Now, you're only thinking about yourself again. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. No, she blurted out, stepping forward. That's not true. But it was, and we both knew it. She opened her mouth again, but I was done listening. I turned away and pulled open the door. The early morning air was cool against my skin, fresh in a way that felt like a reset. One step, then another. Then I was outside, suitcase rolling behind me, the doors swinging shut. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and tossed the suitcase into the passenger seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, staring straight ahead. Inside that house, Jessica was still standing in the doorway, watching me, probably still thinking I was bluffing, that I'd cool off, that I'd come back. She didn't realize she had already lost me. Not just my presence, not just my trust, but me, the man who had loved her, the man who had once believed in her, the man who had thought they had a future. That man was dead. I started the engine, the soft hum filling the silence. And then I drove away. I didn't check the mirror. I didn't wonder what she was doing. She wasn't my concern anymore. 1 week later, a hotel room, a temporary escape, a bed that wasn't mine, a view that didn't mean anything. The past week had been a blur. Conversations with a lawyer, calls from family members who had no idea what had happened, but knew something was wrong. Messages from Jessica, still coming in, still ignored. The legal process was in motion. The accounts had been separated. The house would be dealt with next. Jessica had called me dozens of times. The first few messages were desperate, filled with apologies, with pleas to come back, to talk, to fix things. Then they turned to anger, to frustration, to blaming me for throwing everything away over one mistake. One mistake. That was what she called it. As if it had been an accident. As if she hadn't made the choice to betray me the second she locked that door. I deleted her messages without reading the rest. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel anything. And that was how I knew I was free. One morning, as I was sipping coffee, my phone buzzed with a new text. Ryan's wife. I frowned, my grip tightening around the cup. I had almost forgotten about her. I had no idea who she was. Jessica had never mentioned her, and I had never cared enough about Ryan to find out. But now she had found me. I hesitated, then opened the message. I think we should talk. A slow smile spread across my face. Jessica wasn't the only one who had something to lose.